Welcome, welcome. My name is Erica Greif. I am the leader of Jersey Shore Ellementa, and I'm excited to welcome you here this evening. So we're going to get started in just another second here. Please use the chat for to let us know where you are joining us from this evening, and please use the Q&A feature right below to ask your questions for our Q&A portion later on. So chat for where you're from, Q&A for your questions. Yay, thanks ladies. Ready?
All right. That was it? That was housekeeping? It's
That's
my
all
turn?
I got. That's all I got. Go for it.
All right. So hello everybody and welcome. I am Aliza Sherman and I'm the CEO of Ellementa. I'm also the author of the book, Cannabis and CBD for Health and Wellness. I'll tell you a little bit more about that in a minute. With me today, also on screen at the moment, is Dr. Jessica Knox. And hi, Jessica.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Well, it's good to have you here. So we first do this video portion for a moment so you can see, yes, we are human, we're really here, it's us speaking, but most of this initial part of the program will be done with slides so that you can take a look at them and absorb some of this information. And then we will open it up to questions and bring the video back up. Then we'll go back to slides after that. In between, there's going to be a poll for you to take. And then afterwards, there's going to be a survey for you to take quickly. So that's a little bit of the lay of the land. Now we're going to shut off our video. Hi, everybody. Oh, look, everybody. San Francisco, Davis, California, Rancho Cucamonga. Ah. All right, we're shutting off our video now and we're going to get right down to it because we've got a lot of amazing information to cover. Okay. I'm going to now share my screen with you and let's begin. This webinar, like each of our webinars, is not possible without some fantastic support from our sponsors. So for April, our sponsors are Highland Pantry and No Borders Naturals. Here's a little bit about Highland Pantry. They are the cannabis brand for boomer babes. All right, I'm starting to fit into that category now. They're a new brand out of California, redefining the cannabis experience for older women. And they're launching a new line of low-dose CBD mints. So when I talk about low dose, I mean really low dose. They call them mini, midi, and more. And the mini is less than 2.5. I think it was 1.5 THC, and each of them have a lot of CBD. So if you're looking for a gentle relaxation, if you're looking for a little bit of brightness during your day, a little mood lift without feeling super duper high, Highland Pantry is going to be a great mint available in California. And you can see there's a link there when you get the presentation. You'll also have a link in your email to sign up for their emails to find out more about their products. And then No Borders Naturals, they have an amazing array of CBD products. I mean, anything you could dream up and want, I bet they've got it. They're 100% natural lab tested CBD and organics. I've tried their pain relief balm. It smells amazing. They've got one that smells very much like clove and cinnamon, very warming and effective. They have gummies, they have almonds, they have pet treats, and they've got tinctures. There's a list right there of just some of the things that they've got. Really nice folks out of Phoenix, Arizona. So please check out No Borders Naturals and support them. We'll have an offer from them in the email that follows next week with the recording. Our goals today, as always, to empower you with better information about cannabis for health and wellness, and to also introduce you to Ellementa and our women's wellness community. Before I go on and tell you about Ellementa, I just wanted to say stick around, because at the end of this webinar, we've got a really great bounty of gifts here for you. We've got the tote from Highland Pantry. We've got a special 3-piece gift set. You can see that pictured right here on this slide from No Borders Naturals. Plus, Giovanna is providing their Women's Formula CBD tea. Because we do have CBD here, if you are in Canada, we cannot send you the CBD stuff. So we would send you the tote, and then we would hopefully get an extra tote for the winner in the States. We do apologize for that, but obviously we stick to the laws. So that's coming up later in this hour. Very briefly, Ellementa produces events on a monthly basis in communities across North America, plus Jamaica, and soon London. We're speaking with some women in London to start organizing overseas. We bring together women with cannabis experts and brands whose products we have vetted and whose products we trust and like, and we recommend them to you through these monthly events. And we're using these events also just to bring women together to talk to each other about their stories and experiences. We also will review products on our website. And again, we want to only work with companies where at least one of our team members has tried it. Always, 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 these products will be individual to each one of us and each one of you. So what works for us might not work for you, but we do like to work with companies who we like. And then the content, again, we've got a website. We send out emails. We also have these online forums on Facebook that are closed, but you're welcome into them. They're by state, where we just share as much information as we can, just better information about cannabis, particularly relevant to our lives as women. I mentioned my book, Cannabis and CBD for Health and Wellness. It's real, and it's coming out June 4th. We're also embarking on a book tour, a multi-city. I think it's 12 cities, 14 events so far. So you can meet myself and my co-author, Dr. Gianella Chin, on our book tour in June. We'll tell you more about that in the email that you'll get next week. Now the poll. This is our chance to learn a little bit more about you. What are you most interested in addressing through microdosing? Now, some of you might be coming to this without any real knowledge about microdosing yet, but is there a health issue that you are looking to address? And Erica's going to bring that poll up for us in a moment. And there it is. Just pick one. And this is sleep or pain or anxiety, depression, or are you just looking for general well-being, that just feeling a little bit better overall throughout your day? Or is there something else that is not listed here that's on your mind and you want to address? That's something you can share with us later during the Q&A session as well. But these are often the most common reasons why people are interested in microdosing or interested in cannabis in general. But let's see, are people filling it out right now? You can actually do this right now interactively. This is live. How's it going, Erica? Do we have some responses?
Yeah, we have about 71% of people have voted. We'll give them another, let's see, 8 seconds, and then we'll end the poll.
It's the countdown for the results. Erica's going to show the results in a moment. And again, if you don't know what microdosing is, at least you do know what you're feeling. Oh, anxiety. There you go. Okay. Anxiety, yeah, that's interesting. Well, microdosing is effective for something like that, and we'll hear more from our guest in a moment about that. Thank you. And speaking of our special guest expert, Dr. Jessica Knox. Jessica, I'm going to let you introduce yourself and let everyone know what you do, and this helps them understand where you're coming from in terms of the information you're going to give today.
Perfect. Thanks, Aliza. And thanks everyone for having me. I'm excited to be here with you this evening. So I am Dr. Jessica Knox. I am a preventive medicine physician by training. That's what I completed my residency and board certification in. But pretty quickly after finishing residency, I transitioned to the world of cannabinoid medicine. And what surprises people most about me is probably that I am one of 4 physicians in my family, and all 4 of us are in cannabinoid medicine. And it was actually my mother who was the first to jump into that fray, and we followed her in. So
Wow.
my mom started seeing patients in cannabis card clinics in Oregon in around 2011, while my sister and I were still in medical school. And by the time my sister and I were in residency, we were both in primary care specialties, my sister in family medicine and myself in preventive medicine. We were both really jaded and frustrated with our conventional medical system. We felt like, we'd been trained to sort of manage chronic disease with prescription medicine without really making our patients feel better or improve their quality of life. And we were really frustrated. By then, both of my parents had been seeing patients in the cannabis world. And my sister and I were really just sort of enthralled by their stories of these patients who were not the stereotypical potheads or people claiming back pain and trying to get high coming into these cannabis clinics. These were professionals and babies and grandparents who were seeking cannabis because they were frustrated with the conventional system not making them feel better, or they'd been told there was no hope for them, and this was really their last resort, or maybe they'd heard from a neighbor or a friend that cannabis had really worked for them and they wanted to check it out for themselves. That's why we all got into this, because we felt like this was an opportunity to really, really help people in a meaningful way. What we found, though, in those clinics, because after residency, my sister and I started working in cannabis card clinics as well, patients wanted more than just a piece of paper that said they could access cannabis at a dispensary. They wanted somebody to help them understand, how do I use cannabis to make me feel better? And we as physicians couldn't answer those questions for them. We hadn't been trained in it. The only way we learned about cannabis in medical school was as a drug of abuse, and as a gateway drug. And that was frustrating for us as physicians. We were supposed to be able to help patients. So we took it upon ourselves to read all of the research and papers we could get our hands on, and to document what we saw with patients and learn from each other and from our patients more and more about cannabis as medicine. And ultimately, we ended up opening our own clinics, the American Cannabinoid clinics, where we certainly still provide patients with medical recommendations so they can access cannabis, but more so, we talk about the endocannabinoid system and how we can use cannabis and other therapies to modulate that system. And we also do a lot of work to educate other healthcare professionals so that they can help their patients in an informed way to use cannabis as a medicine.
Wow. Excellent. What a great story. I did see that your family members were also involved. That is fantastic. 4 physicians in the family. Excellent. Well, let's dive right into it. We've got a lot of information to cover. And you mentioned the endocannabinoid system. Typically at this time, I just give my quick little layperson explanation for anyone who's on the line right now who doesn't know what the endocannabinoid system is. And the reason many of us don't have a lot of information about it is it was discovered more recently. The endocannabinoid system is a system within our bodies that lays over all of our other systems. It's in our brain, it's on our organs, it's across our nervous system. So we're familiar with nervous system: digestive, reproductive, respiratory, endocrine. The endocannabinoid system can help regulate and modulate all the other symptoms. Discovered in 1989 and 1990 were the 2 components of this system that are 2 of what scientists believe are several receptors in our bodies, and that's CB1 and CB2. CB2 is mostly in our immune system, and CB1 is throughout our body in other systems. So these are receptors that receive chemical compounds from cannabis, and those chemical compounds in cannabis bind to these receptors, which is where all of these different effects that we talk about, and we're going to talk about more, occur. This is how they occur. So that's a little bit of my layperson explanation of the ECS, or endocannabinoid system. So Jessica, do you have something you would want to add about our ECS?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was a great explanation. I love that you touched upon the fact that the ECS really is involved across all systems of our body, and it's critical in maintaining what we call homeostasis, or the state of physiologic balance in our body. And we sometimes refer to it as like the conductor of a symphony, where it's really keeping all of these systems, these individual systems, playing together in harmony. And it's really cool the way it works. It's by a mechanism called retrograde transmission. And the analogy I like to use for that is like your neighbor. If you live in an apartment building and you're playing your music too loud, your neighbor is going to come knock on your door and say, "Hey, your music's way too loud. Can you please turn it down?" That's how the ECS sort of works. It's that neighbor that says to its cell next to it, "Hey, you're sending signals. We've got the signal. You can turn those down." And that's really important when the signals that that cell is sending are signals of pain or stress or inflammation. So the endocannabinoid system, super critical to maintaining our balance. And it's very responsive to our environment. You know, the things that can get our endocannabinoid system sort of off balance are just the common stresses of daily life: emotional stress, chemical stress from pollutants, bad diet, prescription drugs. So we're going to get into talking about some of the things we can use to manage that endocannabinoid dysfunction. But the reason the ECS is so important is because it is maintaining all of these systems throughout our body.
It's pretty incredible. So I mentioned the chemical compounds in cannabis that are entering our system when we consume cannabis. They are called phytocannabinoids, phyto meaning plant-based cannabinoids. THC, CBD, CBN, CBG, THCV. These are phytocannabinoids, chemical compounds in the cannabis plant that will bind to or affect the receptors within our ECS, or they affect one another. They modulate each other. They work off of and operate off of each other. Now, we as humans produce endocannabinoids naturally. Endo meaning within the body, and one such endocannabinoid is called anandamide, also known as the bliss molecule, which is similar to endorphins that can course through our body when we exercise or when we're feeling really good. That bliss molecule is responsible for it, but that's something we produce naturally. And cannabis actually can help with the production of anandamide. Now, again, these are my layperson terms. This is based on what I've been learning. Anything quickly you wanted to add to cannabinoids, Jessica?
Yeah, that was great. I think what I would add is that both the phytocannabinoids and our own endocannabinoids work on our ECS, as we've been discussing. What's really cool about them too is they work on other body systems. So we know that the cannabinoids can work directly on our serotonin or our norepinephrine or our opioid receptors. And that also adds to the medicinal and therapeutic value that all cannabinoids have, whether externally or exogenously sourced or internally sourced, like our endocannabinoids are.
Excellent. Gosh, I just learned so much each time. Thank you for that. Another chemical compound in cannabis that we have to mention, and we always talk about this in advance of the main part of our program in order to make sure that you understand some of the terminology that we're going to be throwing around a little bit. I'll always stop and make sure that when we say something that might be a little more complex, for those of you who are beginners, we'll try to define them as well. So terpenes are another chemical compound found in cannabis, also found in other plants and foods, responsible for the smells, the tastes, and the colors of different kinds of plants and foods. So there is lemon and citrus plants have limonene. Well, so does cannabis. Conifer plants, trees, fir trees, pine trees have pinene, a terpene, and so does cannabis. Lavender, which a lot of people are very familiar with, you might even use lavender as aromatherapy, and it might be very calming and soothing to you. It contains linalool, so does cannabis. Myrcene is in cannabis. It's also in mango. And I really like to talk about that because cannabis is a plant. It's a plant that is so rich in cannabinoids and so rich in terpenes that it's practically a superfood or a super plant. And it should be something familiar and not something vilified because it contains so many compounds that many things that we already know and that we already consume contains. So how about terpenes? Anything else to add to terpenes?
Yeah. First of all, I just love that you call it a superfood. I think that's amazing. I want to call out another one of my favorite terpenes, which is beta caryophyllene. This is a terpene that is also a cannabinoid. We know that it works on the CB2 receptor, and beta caryophyllene is found in black pepper. So just as you mentioned, terpenes are found in all these common foods and plants that we encounter in our daily lives. We already have a lot of terpenes just sitting in our kitchen cupboards or in our fruit bowl. And these all have medicinal effects on our body.
And I have to admit, the reason I don't have that one, because I can't pronounce it.
It's a lot of syllables.
So I am so glad that you said it for me.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites.
And the last point I wanted to make, I think this is almost before we start the program with the microdosing information, which we are getting to in a moment. It's just, this is plant medicine we're talking about. As legalization continues to spread and more companies are manufacturing products out of the plant, it becomes a lot more precise. But at the moment, a lot of the forms that we currently have or that you might have access to, particularly the plant matter itself, it's plant medicine. So also, if you're into aromatherapy, then you will probably already feel comfortable with the idea of cannabis as plant medicine. So I just kind of bring that up. The next thing I wanted to bring up, small little definition thing. Everyone always says, oh, THC is the psychoactive part of cannabis, but CBD, that's not psychoactive. Well, the proper term for this is it's not psychotropic. So it's true CBD is not going to get you high in that same way that THC does. But all of these ingredients, these chemical compounds we've been talking about, can be psychoactive in that some of them can affect our brains. Small little difference there. And maybe everyone's going to still say psychoactive, but just in case you hear us say something different, that would be usually the difference. But we might also say psychoactive. Just, I think the proper way of saying it would be psychotropic. All right, we're here. We are here. Just had to make sure you knew some of the basic terminology. But Dr. Jessica Knox, what is microdosing?
Yeah, microdosing, why we're all here this evening. Microdosing is what it sounds like. It is small doses of cannabis. When we're talking about microdosing, we're talking about starting at anywhere from a fraction of 1 milligram up to 2.5 or 5 milligrams per dose of cannabis medicine or cannabis product. So exactly as it says here, incremental doses of cannabis products. There are a few reasons for this. One, we're often talking about microdosing in relation to THC. So when we're starting with really, really low doses of THC, like 1 milligram or 2.5 or even 5 milligrams, we are able to largely avoid that psychotropic effect that Aliza was just talking about. So it allows us to medicate or treat ourselves without getting ourselves into trouble with maybe some unwanted effects we don't want. The other nice thing about microdosing is it refers, or it will eventually refer back to this principle of start low, go slow, which maybe some of you are familiar with, where you're starting with a low dose and you are gradually increasing it as needed to the effect you want. And what that allows is for you to, in slowly increasing your dose, you're going to find that perfect dose for you that works really well without giving you any unwanted effects, without overshooting that. And so you're going to find the sweet spot where you're getting sort of the most bang for your buck or the most out of your medicine without overdoing it. And then also, as the slide says here, microdosing is a nice approach for overall wellness. So a lot of people will microdose at the beginning of their day or throughout their day to just sort of help them remain at a nice, calm, even keel. So anxiety was one of the, I think, when we did our poll, anxiety was the number one reason that people cited for being interested in microdosing. Microdosing is a great way to manage anxiety throughout a day. And so that's what we really love about microdosing, those three things.
So I was going to ask a question about, you said up to about 5 milligrams is considered a microdose. What about people who have been consuming cannabis for a really long time? Is it possible that what their microdose is could be even higher than 5 milligrams?
Yeah, absolutely. And this is sort of one of my favorite things about cannabis medicine is that every single person, we're also individual. We all have our own endocannabinoid tone, meaning the dose each of us needs is going to be very different. Well, I don't know about very, but certainly different from each of our neighbors. And so, yes, some people will find that, you know what, the dose that works best for me is 20 milligrams or 25 milligrams. That's okay. That's no longer a microdose, but that's okay. That's the dose that works for you. But if you started with microdosing, you'll have figured it out like, oh, my sweet spot is 22 milligrams, not 50 milligrams. And so microdosing is really just a tool to help you find what does your endocannabinoid system need.
Excellent. Good to know. And so that would be called, when you said the sweet spot, that would be called the minimum effective dose. Not too much, not too little. I think what people may sometimes get confused or frustrated by is that finding that right dose ends up taking time. We're so used to going into the drugstore and the pharmacist will say, this will work. You take what it says on the label and it works. Now, whether it's working at a deeper level to improve your overall health, probably not. It's just addressing some symptoms. But we're sort of used to, we take those 2 painkillers and that's going to do something. So that is not exactly how cannabis works. What are some of the tips that you would give to someone to find that minimum effective dose?
Yeah, so again, we always suggest starting with a low dose. So usually for our patients, we are talking about 2.5 or 5 milligrams just as a starting point. And then we'll also talk about ratios of THC to CBD, right? So we might talk more about this later, or I can talk a little bit about it now, but the relative concentrations of THC and CBD in your product are going to affect how they work for you and how you feel them. And so based on what somebody's trying to treat, we will, recommend a certain ratio, we'll recommend a certain low dose to start with. And then we're counting on you as a patient to be very mindful of how that affects you. We love when patients journal or, in some other way record what their experience is with a specific ratio and dosage, because then what that allows you to do is say, okay, hey, I felt okay with this dose, but I had like I felt like a little bit of anxiety came on, or I didn't quite get enough of effect. And that will allow you to, the next time you dose, to dose maybe a little bit higher, or to say, you know what, instead of doing a 4-to-1 CBD to THC ratio, I think I need a 10-to-1 ratio. And so it requires you as an individual to be much more engaged and involved with your process than our equivalent experience with pharmaceuticals. But again, what's beautiful about that is that ultimately you will end up with a very personal medication that works exactly as you need it to make your body feel better and be better.
And with less negative side effects.
That's exactly right.
So we're going to talk a little bit about the different ways that you can consume and microdose cannabis and also CBD. Those cannabis meaning really we're talking a lot more about the THC versus the CBD or both. So let's talk a little bit about smoking. what is smoking a good way of microdosing?
So smoking is never my favorite method of using cannabis. People who prefer to smoke, that's fine. I'll never try to convince somebody that they should not smoke cannabis if that's what they're comfortable with and that's what they like doing. I'll talk about both pros and cons. So one pro for smoking or inhaling cannabis in general is it is pretty easy to titrate a dose because you feel the effect of smoking or otherwise inhaling cannabis pretty quickly. You'll feel its effect sometimes as fast as 30 seconds, but typically within a few minutes. And why that's helpful is you'll know really quickly, was that the dose I need? Am I getting the relief I'm looking for? If not, you can redose, right? You can take another puff or inhalation. The reason we don't love smoking is because you are combusting the cannabis, as the slide says, often at very high temperatures. We're talking, 600 to 900 degrees Celsius. That creates some harmful byproducts. Cannabis smoking has not been linked to lung cancer or anything like that. In fact, it's been shown to be protective. But there are still some harmful byproducts that can cause chronic bronchitis or inflammation of the airways, irritation of the airways. Mm. And at that high temperature, you're also burning off a lot of terpenes and a lot of the other good stuff that's in there. You're also losing a lot of your medicine to side stream smoke. So it's not my favorite method by any means.
All right, well then let's move into vaping. Talk to me a little bit about vaping for microdosing.
So vaping is a little bit better. It has the same pro of smoking in that because it's a quick onset, it's very easy to titrate your medicine to the needed dose. You'll feel really quickly, is this giving me what I need it to? If not, you can redose. It's what usually vaporizing will heat the cannabis material to about 160 to 230 degrees Celsius. And so that way you're not creating as many harmful byproducts. You're not burning off a lot of the good stuff that's in there. You're able to sort of gently liberate the various phytocannabinoids and terpenes from that material so that you're getting more of the medicine.
Excellent. Okay. So let's talk about ingesting. So there's so many different ways, so many different forms now that are being manufactured to ingest. So let's talk a little bit about the different forms of ingesting and how ingesting might work for microdosing.
Yeah. So when we're talking about ingesting, I generally think of eating, right? So like an edible, like you're eating something, or there are now, as you said, a lot of capsules or tablets, or I'll let you in on this secret immediately. My favorite method is a tincture, where you're taking a tincture into your mouth. These all behave a little bit differently. When you are ingesting something into your stomach, like you're swallowing it down into your stomach and it's getting digested, that's going to go through what we call first pass metabolism as it goes through your liver before it hits your bloodstream. So your liver is going to eat up some of that medicine before it can get to you and you feel an effect from it. That's why when we swallow cannabis, it can take anywhere from 1 to 2 hours to kick in. And that also reduces the bioavailability of the medicine. Tinctures, on the other hand, when you administer a tincture, you hold it in your mouth for a minute or two. That's a common error when using tinctures. People will put them in their mouth and swallow it. And that turns it into an edible almost. But with a tincture, if you hold it in your mouth for a minute or two before swallowing, that gives your oral mucosa a chance to absorb that medicine directly into the bloodstream. And so you're not losing medicine to the first pass metabolism. And you're also going to get a much quicker onset than if you just swallowed it. Tinctures will typically take effect within 15 to 20 minutes. Another thing I like about tinctures is because they work pretty quickly in that way, you can again use microdosing a little bit more mindfully, because you'll know pretty quickly whether you're having an effect. when you swallow a medicine, because it's going to take anywhere from 1 hour to 2 hours to know if it's working, you might not know. You might not know, like, did it kick in yet, or am I not feeling it? It kicked in, but it wasn't enough. There's a lot more question there. And so when we're talking about ingestibles or edibles and microdosing, I tend to prefer thinking about those in the realm of either wellness, like I'm ingesting this for wellness, because if I'm using it just for wellness, I wouldn't necessarily expect to feel anything, but I'm putting these cannabinoids in my body and I know they're going to work on my ECS to work on that tone for wellness. Or if I'm somebody who has trouble sleeping or staying asleep at night, an edible might be useful because it's going to remain effective for 6 to 8 hours.
Got it. So when we're talking about edibles and we start talking about microdosing and the doses, the precision of dosing, I've always wondered, how precise can you really be if you're cutting up a cookie, for example, or some other, cutting a gummy in half? So often gummies will come in 5 milligrams per gummy. So then if you cut that in half, do you have exactly 2.5 milligrams? Or is that going to matter as much in terms of being super precise about it?
Yeah, I think that's a great point, right? What you're getting at is you're relying on this production process to have mixed this cannabis into this edible in an extremely regular and homogeneous way, such that the phytocannabinoids are equally dispersed everywhere, which is highly unlikely. And so if you are trying to precisely dose, it can be really hard with an edible. When we're talking about microdoses, there's very little in the way of harm that might come to you, because the doses are so small. But if you are trying to really accurately dial into a dose, an edible is really hard to do that with.
Got it. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. So then tablets, capsules, sometimes it's starting to feel like, as the legalization's happening and all of the new forms are being produced, they're becoming a little bit more pharmaceutical-like. Is that good? Is that bad? Is that, what is that? Should we be concerned in any way?
Yeah, it's an interesting topic. And I think, like most things, there's good and bad. I think the pills, tablets, capsules, because these are forms that we recognize as medicine, I think it will help a lot of people who are, currently scared or concerned about using cannabis. I think it will make them feel a little bit more comfortable and maybe more willing to try things out, because, this doesn't look like a drug, it looks like medicine. So I think it might be beneficial in that way. I think where I get concerned, and I believe we are talking a little more about this later, but as the industry, the cannabis industry, becomes sort of more mainstream and more legalized, and pharmacy, big pharmacy does get interested in cannabis, the question is, like, how are these things going to be formulated? Is this still going to be plant medicine, or is this going to become isolates medicine? And there are some reasons we worry about cannabis isolates that we can talk about later. But, is that the way the industry is going to go as legalization sort of runs its course? It remains to be seen. I, for one, hope that we can still maintain really, whole plant-based medicine, even in these pill, tablet, and capsule forms, because I think that's what's best for our bodies. But yeah, we'll have to see how things shake out.
Right. So much is changing. Tinctures, you talked about how much you like them, and I do hold tinctures under my tongue, and I was aware of the sublingual, the glands underneath your tongue to help with absorption. But it never occurred to me that if I were just to swallow it, that it would be, like you said, more like an edible that has to process through your body in the same way that a food would. So that I found that to be really interesting. Now, did you mention about fat soluble?
I didn't.
You did or did not? Sorry.
No, I didn't. I'm so glad this is here because I hadn't mentioned it.
Okay, because that's what I wanted to also mention. People may not know that THC, for example, is fat soluble. So consuming it with some fat can help with absorption. And that's a lot of the reason why when we talk about tincture, so the old-fashioned tinctures that I used to take for echinacea, astragalus, all these immune boosting tinctures were always alcohol-based. And I got to tell you, holding alcohol in your mouth is those alcohol-based tinctures that burns. It's not pleasant. But if you do get a tincture with THC, with cannabis infused, they're more and more based in coconut oil or some form of oil. Can you talk just a little bit more about that?
Yeah, of course. So yes, the phytocannabinoids are lipid soluble or fat soluble, meaning they dissolve in fat. And yeah, I too am happy to see that most tinctures these days are oil-based, because that allows the phytocannabinoids to really distribute in them much more easily and much more evenly, compared to an alcohol-based tincture where the phytocannabinoids would tend to clump into pockets. And so you would really need to shake vigorously your tincture to try to distribute the medicine in there. But that's less necessary with an oil-based tincture, because that's what the cannabinoids like. They like that oily environment. And then certainly within our body will have an easier time sort of absorbing, especially the MCT oil, but it will have an easier time absorbing that fatty material compared to an alcohol.
Very interesting. So we were talking about the different forms that all these companies are now producing. There are now oral sprays and mists and nasal mists. I just saw that a company out of Colorado called Vera Wellness, I think they're also available in California, has a nasal mist. So talk a little bit about an oral spray or a nasal mist and how that might work for microdosing.
Yeah, these are so interesting. So I should have mentioned with the tinctures, but it also applies to these sprays and mists. Usually the sort of administration method, so in this case, the spray, or in the case of the tincture, the dropper, they're usually calibrated. So you'll know, it should say it on the product label, but it will say like 1 spray or 1 dropper full equals 5 milligrams of CBD or whatever it is. And so that's nice because you're able to get like a very metered dosing. The oral sprays will act very much like a tincture in that it will sit in your mouth, it'll get absorbed into the oral mucosa. The nasal mists that will be absorbed, through the nasal septum, they again will work similarly, but they'll probably work a little bit more quickly than an oral tincture or oral spray would, just because that nasal mucosa is slightly different. But again, these are nice because you can get a really metered dose, and you should be able to read that product label and know exactly what you're getting. And then you'll feel effect usually within 10 to 15 minutes at the earliest. And you can use that as quick feedback to know, do I need to dose more or did I get what I need?
Excellent. Interesting. So you did mention before, start low and go slow. This is sort of the refrain of anybody who does use cannabis, who's talking to a friend who has never used cannabis. I mean, this is a very common phrase. I think one of the things I was wondering about is when you start low and then you incrementally increase, I would think that you wouldn't want to incrementally increase necessarily that same day, because I've heard so many stories about someone who said, well, it didn't feel like anything, so I just took a little more, and then I took a little more, and I took some more after that, and next thing you know, they have 25 milligrams in their system, not the 5 microdosing. So is that really the way you start to slowly build up, or are there reasons to do your little microdoses more within a single day, just to find the dose? Because I know that some people then microdose throughout the day once they know their dose. But what is sort of the ideal way to just incrementally increase?
Yeah, and I think it depends on what you're trying to manage. So again, for the people here today who are mostly dealing with anxiety, you're trying to get some kind of effect there, and so based on the administration method you're using, you should have some idea of when you start to feel it. But let's say this is day one, you're trying it out. If you're starting with 2.5 milligrams, for instance, and you're feeling some anxiety, you can do 2.5 milligrams of a tincture, for instance, and that might be, 2.5 milligrams of CBD. It might be 2.5 milligrams of THC. If that were the case, if you had 2.5 milligrams of THC, I would say make sure you have at least 10 milligrams of CBD as part of that. So that's a 4-to-1 ratio. But you would dose with that tincture. If in 30 minutes you're still feeling anxious, I think it's okay for you to dose again, but you're still going to dose with that 2.5 milligrams.
Okay.
So ultimately it would have been like, okay, I needed 5 milligrams to manage that anxiety. The next day, you might just try 5 milligrams to start with. You wouldn't necessarily go back to that 2.5 and build up. You could start at a new sort of starting point the next day to see how you're doing there. And again, the idea is that you're dosing and you're giving your body the time to give you the feedback of how that's working for you. And then you're making a mindful decision about what's next. Did I get the effect I need? Am I feeling unwanted side effects? If not, do I need more? And yes, over the course of days, you will find your optimum dose. And once you're at that optimum dose, you can sort of use that as needed throughout the day. But as you're getting started, depending on the administration method you're using, you might redose more quickly, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. So we're about to get to our Q&A. So if you have a question, make sure you use the Q&A mechanism that you should be seeing on your screen. We have something that's kind of a complex thing to talk about. I might have to have you come back and talk about the difference between isolates and full spectrum. But if we can just keep it brief and move right into those questions, I know I see a lot of them already queued up. So what's an isolate?
Yeah, so a cannabinoid isolate is when a particular cannabinoid, for instance, CBD, this is very common in this in this current legal landscape, is when one cannabinoid has been extracted from the plant or it has been synthesized. We can synthesize some of the cannabinoids these days. And so instead of getting that sort of whole plant material that includes the terpenes and the flavonoids and the multiple phytocannabinoids that will come in a plant source, in a whole plant source, you're getting just CBD or just THC. They can be easier to dose because you don't have sort of the whole entourage effect going on.
Mm-hmm.
But what we see with isolates is they tend to have more of an unreliable outcome, meaning their therapeutic index is much smaller. So people start having unwanted side effects at much lower doses than they would if they were using a whole plant medicine, because we've lost a lot of the entourage effect that's going on to make it a well-tolerated and efficacious medicine.
And so the entourage effect, also I've heard it called the ensemble effect.
Yes.
Are the cannabinoids working with each other? Some of them, in a sense, working against each other, like CBD would temper THC.
Exactly.
So without those sort of mixing together in the natural way. So then that would be a full spectrum. Full spectrum is as nature intended, as nature made it. And it's having the natural interaction between those cannabinoids. Now, is that going to be harder to dose something that's full spectrum?
So it's not necessarily harder to dose. We will still base our dosing on, depending on the patient, on like what is the THC you're getting or what is the CBD you're getting. But there are, some more sort of unknowns there, right? Because it's like, okay, we know you're getting THC and CBD, and there's CBN and CBG. How might these play together? How is if this is a limonene dominant or a linalool dominant, how is that going to change the way that it has an effect? So there are just sort of more variables to consider.
Mm-hmm.
But dosing isn't necessarily more complex.
Got it. All right. So everybody, just the last couple of points, and we're opening up to questions. Microdosing is individual to each person. start low, go slow, and keep track of what you're taking, including brand name. There's a great app called Strain Print, created by a woman, and you can put it on your smartphone, and it helps you track and journal what you're feeling, what you're taking. And then if you get too high and you have CBD on hand, if you get that uncomfortable feeling that you just don't want to go there, a little bit of CBD will go a long way to regulating, modulating that high. Or you can chew on a peppercorn, you can chew on some lemon, and those could have a similar kind of reducing that high effect. So those are some tips to remember. And now for the questions. And in the question portion of this program, we bring it back to videos. So let me press all those buttons, stop sharing screen. And there you are. Erica, let's jump right into the questions. I know we're running a little long, but this has been incredibly informative.
Absolutely. And the questions are fantastic. We have a great audience here tonight. First question is, if a depleted endocannabinoid system can result in illness, and we augment with endocannabinoids as we consume cannabis, is this cumulative, and do we eventually balance the CES? Would we eventually not require cannabis once the CES is balanced?
ECS.
ECS.
Yeah.
What did I say? Sorry.
Sorry. Potato.
No, that is a great question, and one we get frequently. So phytocannabinoids, yeah, they sort of supplement our system, our work as stand-ins when our own endocannabinoid system is run down and our endocannabinoids aren't doing what they need to. Our endocannabinoid system gets run down, as I said, by the insults we put upon it. So whether that's our, tough relationships, emotional stress, chemicals in our environment, bad diet, et cetera, we can use phytocannabinoids to treat the system while it's under those insults. But one of the things we really work on at our clinics is this isn't just about cannabis. If we're going to get your ECS back into health, we need to talk about your nutrition and, your working environment. Is it healthy? Is your home environment healthy? What kinds of cleaning agents are you using? Because if we don't get your ECS back into balance, you might need to use phytocannabinoids indefinitely to help manage your symptoms or disease. Ideally, you wouldn't have to rely on anything to be healthy. And that's the goal, is to get you to a state of health where you don't need any medicine, but phytocannabinoids are a wonderful, safe medicine to use while you need that.
And it's also, it's like a supplement. It's a fortification. Yeah. We can't control our environment. We can't control situations and circumstance, but what we can do is control what we put in our bodies. I'm seeing a couple of interesting things here that I think are quick to answer. Do you metabolize alcohol solvents faster than oil-based tinctures?
Oh, interesting. Well, I wouldn't think so. So when we're talking about the tinctures are whether they're alcohol, the mucosa, hopefully you guys can hear me. I feel like I'm freezing.
Yeah, you're fine. I got you.
Okay, but they're going to be absorbed into the oral mucosa, right into the bloodstream. And so they're not going to get metabolized by the liver faster or slower. The cannabinoids will break down at the same rate regardless of what their medium was.
Okay, interesting. And then somebody said, and this is kind of a question that I had myself, can I chew an edible for a long time and hold it in my mouth and make it more like a tincture?
Yeah, you can.
And then because if there's a mint, I sometimes will just put the mint under my tongue and let it dissolve under my tongue instead. And it takes a long time because it's not one of those fast dissolving. And so I do that sometimes. So that, very interesting. Okay, Erica, what other questions? Sorry, I just jumped right in.
Okay, so I have chronic insomnia, and I have taken 10 milligrams gummies at night and have not fallen asleep. Do you think if I start microdosing that would help? Need some guidance here.
Okay, so first, before we say anything, we are not diagnosing you, and we are not making a personal individual recommendation to you. And I know that our doctor here is also very well versed in the fact that we cannot give you, the question asker, very specific information. But we can, in general terms and in experiential terms, give you a couple of pieces of information. So I'll start because I can give the very non-medical, and then maybe Jessica, you might have some points on even what I say. So what I have found is that an edible takes such a long time, it's not helping me get to sleep. But vaping is quite instantaneous, puts me right into sleepiness and relaxation, but I wake up in the middle of the night. So I've learned just for myself a combination of something to help me fall asleep more rapidly, and then something that takes longer to begin effect to keep me through that hump of 1 a.m., 2 a.m., or 3 a.m. wake up is really quite effective. So I also found that sugary treats and sugary edibles, sugar can wake you up. This is why when you drink wine, it's not really going to help you stay asleep through the night often, because it converts to sugar and then the sugar gets you all active and you wake up. So sometimes a sugary treat doesn't seem to be the ideal edible. So can you build off of that a little bit, Jessica?
Yeah, absolutely. And that was perfect. What you're doing, Aliza, is what we call method layering, where you're getting the benefits of quick onset and the longer. Oh, sorry, am I back?
Yeah, you did great. So quick onset.
Quick onset with vaporizing or tincture plus an edible that's going to give you longer effect is perfect for people who have trouble falling asleep and staying asleep. The other thing I would throw out there quickly is that I don't know what is in this gummy edible this person is using, but CBN is a cannabinoid that's really great for sleep, and myrcene and linalool are terpenes that are really great for supporting sleep as well.
So those are big good ingredients. And so the other question, I think the greater question to this is, if you're microdosing, will that overall help you fall asleep better? Is there a real direct connection, or because it seems that if your ECS is in better balance, maybe that means better hormonal balance,
right,
other kinds of balance, could that potentially help you sleep? Or do you really also need something to address the issue?
I think microdosing can help, because exactly as you're saying, like one of the goals of microdosing is just to get that ECS back in a nice tone. We call it ECS tone. And if you can restore that tone through microdosing, you might see a lot of things get better. You might see your sleep get better, anxiety get better, pain get better, just because you're getting that tone. But it may be early on, you still need to do that sort of episodic dosing of like, okay, it's time for me to go to sleep, I need some help. But over time, you might not need to do that anymore if you're microdosing at the right level.
Okay, very interesting. I think we have time for one more question, and we will try to review a lot of the other questions and get some responses out, whether it be in a blog post or articles in the future, or even in a future email. So what is another question you've got there, Erica?
So last question is, I'm a caregiver to my aging parents, and is microdosing good for them?
Good question. Jessica, what would you say?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So my family believes in microdosing as a supplement, like as a daily supplement, particularly with CBD. When we're talking about elderly folks, we should also consider the fact that a lot of times those people are on polypharmacy. They might be on a lot of drugs, a lot of medicines. And so one thing we always want to think about is drug-drug interactions. They're theoretically CBD, this isn't theoretical. I'll get to the theoretical part. CBD is metabolized through cytochrome P450, which is this enzyme in our liver that metabolizes a ton of our pharmaceutical drugs. Have CBD in our system, it may reduce the metabolism of those other drugs, meaning those other drugs can sort of build up in the system and cause toxicity. We haven't seen that in practice, but it's still something to be, aware of. And so what we often recommend for elderly folks, if they do have other medications, dose cannabis at like a staggered time. So they're not dosing the medicine and cannabis at the same time. And again, with microdosing, that absolutely should be less of a concern. But the short answer to the question is yes. I think microdosing is perfectly appropriate for everybody, really, but certainly for elderly parents as well.
And I think if you are caregiving, the most important thing is make sure that the person that you are caregiving is aware of what you're giving them, is wanting that. I know when I was taking care of my parents as they were dying, my mom in particular was very adamant that she did not want it until a certain stage where then she asked, okay, I'll try. So just making sure that they have the faculties to be able to understand what it is that you're administering to them. All right, we're going to shut off the video, go to the last couple of slides, a couple of offers. We're going to pick a winner, and then we'll say goodnight for the evening, because Erica's over there on the East Coast, as are many of you. So just being mindful of sleep. So the winner, Erica, if you could let us know who has won this wonderful set of gifts from our sponsors.
Yes, congratulations to Natalie B. Natalie B, congratulations.
Okay, if you're Natalie B, last name starts with a B, right? Then we'll be in touch. We'll let you know who you are. Thank you to our sponsors, of course. You will all be receiving access to our ebook. If you've come to this webinar several times, you probably already have the ebook, but please do share it with people that you know who could use it. Some facts about cannabis for very, very beginners. You'll also get a recording of this webinar. You'll get it next week, and it'll edit out some of the bloopers on either side, but it'll have all the bulk of the information, and you can watch it as many times as you want to. We have some groups that you can join if you're interested in joining one of the Ellementa groups, ellementa.com/groups. The gatherings are the in-person, face-to-face meetings. They're going to have a bunch of them this month. I think next month we even have about 20 or more of them. Then in June is the book tour. So please stay in touch with us to find out how you can meet up with one another and with us face-to-face, of course, on social media. How do we find you, Jessica?
Yeah, so you can find us. We are the aclinics.com. Our clinics are based in, we are able to see some, we are able to see patients via telemedicine as well from some other states. And on Twitter, we are the Knox Doctors. Or sorry, not Twitter, on Instagram, we are the Knox Doctors.
THEKNOXDOCTORS, the Knox Doctors? All right. You cut out a little bit, so we'll make sure that in the email that any information that might have been missing, you will know how to get in touch with Dr. Jessica Knox. Save the date, May 22nd, Cannabis and CBD for Beauty and Self-Care. The expert will be announced, and you can already sign up and save that date and save your seat. Thank you again to Highland Pantry. They are going to be coming out with a microdose mint, which is a wonderful way to microdose. So they'll be out in California soon, soon, soon. I can't wait. And there's a sign up. You can click on that link when you get the presentation and sign up for their emails to find out when their products are on the shelf. And oh, No Borders Naturals. Sorry about that, folks. There is the wrong logo on the right-hand side, but look in the middle of this screen, please. No Borders Naturals. They have so many incredible products. Please go to their website. You can take a look at the No Borders gift, 3-gift set, but also just peruse all the incredible different kinds of products that they have. Like I say, I love their pain balm. It's the bomb, as they say. It smells incredible and it works. And I don't recommend products lightly. I really don't. I'm extremely careful. I review so many products, but when it really works for me, I will be honest about it and let you know. Thanks again for being here. Thanks to Giovanna for their CBD tea. Thanks to Erica for managing this webinar. Thanks to Dr. Jessica Knox for all of this incredible wisdom and spoken in layman's terms, layperson's terms, so that even I can understand. And thanks to all of you for being here, for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to learn about something as important as microdosing, as a way to feel better, to address real health issues. We really all just want to feel better and help our loved ones feel better, and microdosing could be an option. Thanks so much for being here tonight, and like I said, you're going to be getting this recording to watch this over and over again and share it with the people you love. Have a good night. Okay, everybody, this is the after the after the official webinar ends. This is the
After party.
this is the after webinar party. And oh my God, no borders. I do apologize for getting the logo wrong on there.
Still
We're
good.
only human.
We're only
Yeah, exactly.
It's all good.
What else is happening over here? Let's see.
Lots in the chat. Lots and lots. Lots of amazing questions. Lots of chat.
Yeah, let's see. We'll address a couple of them informally now. Company in California continues to follow federal guidelines regarding THC. It's illegal. As an RN, I can't afford a positive random test, drug test. Can I avoid this with a medical card?
I know.
I get every single gathering I'm at. I get the same drug testing question and all. It is so dicey. There is no one.
No, and the medical card does not protect you. Like if your company isn't into it, like if your company says that's not okay, your medical card doesn't protect you from that, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's just, it's just so dicey. I cannot wait until it's finally so normalized that nobody's going to be testing for that anymore.
Yeah.
And that people are just consuming responsibly and understanding medically how beneficial it is.
Right.
What are the leading CBD-led full spectrum strains? I'm not very good at strains. Do you know what a good CBD strain
So no, we do not speak in the language of strains at all.
Interesting. Okay.
Because you and I could grow the same strain, but I'm growing here in California and you're growing in Alaska, and they could have completely different things in them based on the soil, the environment. And so from a medical perspective, it's not helpful for me to talk about strains. I'm going to talk about the CBD to THC ratio. I'm going to talk about, you know, what are the terpenes we're looking for in there? What are the other phytocannabinoids? Because the strain name just isn't reliable.
Okay, that is a really good point. And gosh, we're not recording anymore. So I think that we're going to have to do an interview, and we'll post it on our website, and we'll talk a little bit more about some of these nuances, which I think are really important.
Yeah.
Let's see, what else do we have over here?
They're looking for Dr. Knox's Instagram again.
Oh, okay. So it's at the.
Let me look, because I feel like it's the Knox Docs. After I said it, I was like,
check
right? And I was trying to look it up. That is so bad.
That's okay. Go look that up quick. And why don't you type it in so everyone can see it too?
Okay. Because my sister is like the Instagram like cheerleader, and I'm just like, that's
all right. We got it. Somebody was asking, are there cons with vaping? Wouldn't one of the cons of vaping just simply be inhaling something into your lungs, and some people might be sensitive? Or what would you think would be a con to vaping? All right, okay, I'll let you type it.
No, that's okay. Instagram equals cons to vaping. So yeah, I mean, anytime you're inhaling, I guess, you know, there's concern, but because vaporizing is heating the material to such lower temperatures.
So it's like more warming it.
It's really exactly right. It's really just warming it, and that warming, and I can't remember, there's a great chart somewhere that shows the temperatures at which the various cannabinoids and terpenes start to get liberated.
Yes.
Yeah. And so you're just gently warming it until those temperatures where they can each individually be liberated, and you're not getting the tar and a lot of the byproducts. You still get some of the polyaromatic hydrocarbons, but it's so much gentler and with less byproduct. You do lose some stuff in side stream, but it's really, if somebody wants to inhale their medication because they want that quick effect, they want that easily titrated dose, vaporizing is great.
Can you explain what side stream is? I should have had you define that. What's side stream?
Yeah, sorry. So what we mean by that, right? When you are vaporizing or smoking, you're blowing off a lot of stuff.
Oh,
or like,
okay.
right? Or even when you're smoking, certainly things are smoking even when you're not inhaling it. And so you're losing some of your medicinal material in those.
Okay. Yeah. And somebody said all phytocannabinoids are fat soluble, correct? Not just THC?
Correct. They're all fat soluble.
Oh, I should have said something like that. Okay. I always focus just on THC. I don't even mention CBD being fat soluble. I always just was talking about. So then basically phytocannabinoids are fat soluble. Therefore, by putting them into oil, they will absorb better. Oh, exactly. Gosh. Thank you. Thank you for all this knowledge. Let's see what else we've got.
How about this one? Is effectiveness of CBD different if it contains THC?
Yes. I know the answer
is the what different? Sorry, I missed it.
The effectiveness of
the effectiveness.
Aliza says yes.
The answer is yes.
So CBD with even just a little bit of THC becomes more effective, is able to do more of what it does, because isn't it true that CBD as a cannabinoid does not bind? That it can affect and modulate, but it isn't binding. So having a little THC presence, and it's the THC that actually binds, and that maybe opens it up for CBD. How would you explain that, or am I completely just
No, you were not completely just. It's actually really interesting. So you are exactly correct. CBD does not bind directly to cannabinoid receptors. It does bind to some other receptors, which is interesting, but not cannabinoid receptors. THC is the one that does that. And CBD, they call it like an allosteric modulator. Lots of big fancy words for just, it changes the way that THC can bind to those receptors, which is why it sort of undermines the psychotropic effect of THC. The other way that CBD works, aside from binding to other receptors, is it actually inhibits or prevents FAAH, the enzyme that breaks down anandamide, from doing its job. And so what CBD allows is for our own anandamide to stay around longer in the system and do its job before it gets eaten up by the degrading enzyme.
Right. Okay. I just read about that yesterday, actually. Somebody, can you microdose with tea? Yes, right? You can microdose with tea.
Yeah.
Just knowing how many milligrams is in your tea, and it depends on how your tea is made. For example, there's a company called, I just forgot, Stillwater Brands in Colorado that actually has a THC tea, a CBD tea, and a CBD and THC tea, I believe. And they make a water-soluble version. So I'm sure they're working with isolates then, I guess. They're making a water-soluble version of THC and you could actually add that to your tea. So you could get a little packet of THC powder that you could put into tea. They also make teas that are infused. So there's so many products out there. And again, it goes back to isolates versus full spectrum and all of that as well. But yeah, you could use tea to microdose. We should, catatonic, somebody said. Catatonic is a good, I think maybe, is that a good CBD tea? I'm not sure what they were responding to.
It's a strain, it's a 1-to-1.
1-to-1 strain. Okay.
So, well, that's,
But again, for depending on how it was grown and all of that. All right. The effectiveness of sublingual tablets, very effective, right? Because you're getting the absorption through your sublingual glands.
Yep.
And that would be faster than a regular tablet that just takes a much longer time to dissolve in your mouth.
Exactly.
Okay. Hey, we covered so many good things. If you stuck around, you got all this good information. But we have to let Erica go to sleep now.
Thank you.
And
Thank
oh wait,
you,
Jessica, where
Erica.
are you? Jessica, where are you based? You're in Oakland,
I'm in,
right?
so yeah, I'm in Oakland, California. The other 3 docs are in Portland, Oregon, which is why our clinics are based there.
Okay. Oh, somebody's asking about patches. I'm curious about that too. Can you microdose with patches?
Well, again, like depending on the dose that's in the patch, yeah, you can.
Okay. I think the patches tend to have higher doses. I don't
I think they
cut it.
do.
So I'm wondering if you actually cut them. I don't know. See, I'm always worried about if it comes in a high dose, but then you're supposed to cut
Yeah.
it up. Are you really getting?
In general, cutting just patches in general, when we're talking about medicines, we generally do not want to cut them.
Okay.
But usually what happens with patches, they usually deliver the medicine over a longer period of time. So there might be like 10 milligrams total in there, but it might be delivering like 1 milligram an hour, right? Like that's when you have to read the package labeling to understand what it's doing, because it might actually be giving you a micro dose, but you're wearing it for 12 hours. And so it's going to cumulatively give you more. But
Okay.
yeah.
Interesting. And somebody just said, did I hear the doctor correctly? CBD does not bind to CB1 and CB2 receptors. And that is true. It does. CBD does not bind to those receptors. Okay. That is true. This is great. All right. Now we're really going to let Erica go to sleep. Thanks everyone for being
Thank
here.
you, Erica.
And we'd be looking for that email from us next week with the link to the recording and the additional information. Jessica, if you want to add anything to that email, just email it to us and we'll send it on to everybody. Awesome. All right. Have a good night, everyone.
Thanks, everyone. Good night.
Good night.